Howdy y'all, welcome back. Thank you for being here. We're going to look at a pretty mind-blowing facet of history. Just one particular portion of the current narrative, so take it with a grain of salt, but one that is filled with vital information regarding some pretty fascinating old world topics. We will be discussing one man, an engineer, an architect, an artist, a mason, but beyond that, he is given credit for creating or designing the original star fortification, or star fort city, considered to be his brainchild, which he referred to as the ideal city. Not only this, but the narrative says he actually put his work into action by constructing over 70 known fortifications throughout Italy in the 15th century. This man is also credited as being one of the leading inspirations to Leonardo da Vinci, who was said to have kept a copy of this man's treatise on architecture on his person. Everything we're looking at in today's photographs were created by this individual. If it's a painting, it was painted by this man. If it's a sculpture, it was sculpted by him. If it's architecture, it was said to have been designed by this man. And yet before I dove into this narrative, I had never heard of this individual before. Francesco di Giorgio Martini was born in 1439 in Siena in Italy. His exact birth date is said to be unknown. Equally as interesting is that almost nothing is known about this man's upbringing, about his family, or about his history before he turned 25. That is when he is first recorded in the history books as selling a statue he created of John the Baptist. And this is the first of Giorgio's long list of achievements. We're told Francesco di Giorgio Martini had an artistic career that didn't really begin to blossom until he was 31 in the year 1471, which is when he became a professional artist, both painting and sculpture, but he was also known as a leading architect and, amongst other things, a world-class engineer. In that year, 1471, the narrative says Giorgio is recorded as renovating, expanding, and modernizing the Siena aqueduct and the city fountain system, a massive system and project which added over 1/3 more water to the city while enlarging all of the fountains. This was said to have been completed in 1473. As Giorgio worked on this aqueduct, he was also caught and charged with a form of trespassing on the monastery of the Holy Savior, just outside of Siena. Initially, Giorgio was banished from the city for 3 months, but later, he paid a fine and he returned to his work. However, as Francesco di Giorgio Martini appeared to steadily work in all these different fields, at least according to the narrative, during the early 1470s, by 1475, his life, and in return, the entire trajectory of human history appears to have been shifted. In that year, 1475, Giorgio was said to have been hired as the lead architect and engineer for Federico da Montefeltro, the Duke of Urbino. Giorgio Martini was said to have then designed over 70 large-scale fortifications, including city walls, to encompass entire Italian towns and cities, as well as the first star-shaped cities in history. According to the narrative, the Star City arose as a necessity caused by the Pazzi conspiracy, in which certain nobles and businessmen attempted to overthrow the powerful Medici family. The resulting conflict led to the founding of advanced, fortified cities, which were mostly designed by Giorgio. We're also told that this Giorgio was such an advanced engineer that he constructed massive stone buildings on steep cliffs, mountaintops, and hillsides, as in the case of the Santa Maria del Grazie in Cortana, Tuscany, Italy. However, his star-shaped cities truly appeared to have been at the heart of his genius. In an architectural treatise that swept across the realm upon its publication, Francesco di Giorgio Martini gave designs for amongst other things, working engines, land vehicles, flying machines, and other forms of technology that would not become commonplace for hundreds of years. However, the entire third book of this treaty was dedicated to the quote, ideal city, which he perceived as a completely symmetrical, polygonal, star-shaped fortification. We're told within this treaty, he invented such things as the wedge bastion, which became key to the star fort design. A copy of this treaty was said to have been kept on the person of Leonardo da Vinci, who was said to have referred to it often. Giorgio Martini has bronze sculptures that are showcased throughout Italy. He has paintings that are all throughout the world, including in America, like the Madonna and Child with two angels, kept in the Lau Art Museum. Giorgio was known for his lifelike depictions of cities, which he was said to have hand-drawn in perspective, albeit, and this wording is what I found to be so revealing, it says he drew every single city devoid of people. He was partially tasked with working on the Siena Cathedral renovations, where he was said to have afterwards been hired as the official architect, engineer, and architectural inspector of all of Siena. He also designed multiple sections of the interiors of the buildings he renovated, including designing the artwork. In 1490, he traveled to Milan and met with a scholar who was said to have looked up to him. This scholar was named Leonardo da Vinci. Giorgio Martini was charged with constructing a 2-scale model of the dome in Milan, which would help aid construction for the beautiful cathedral. We're told not only did he design this dome, but Giorgio Martini then made vast improvements on the overall design of the entire cathedral, which then inspired Da Vinci, and Giorgio was said to have been paid quite handsomely for his work. Giorgio then designed even more fortified cities, even more star forts during the Italian War of 1494 through 1498, when he was the lead architect and military engineer of Ferdinand II of Naples. Besides building these vastly complicated, fortified cities, the first star fort cities, during this time, we're told Giorgio Martini also became the first man in recorded history to use tunnels in warfare. He was said to have used the vast tunnels beneath different Italian cities, as well as founding new tunnels using explosives from mining technology for the first time in recorded warfare. In 1499, he was elected as the Master Mason of all of Siena, and by 1501, around the age of 62, Francesco di Giorgio Martini was said to have suffered a series of ailments before retiring to the countryside just outside of Siena. From his quote, small residence, it said he was able to see the city that he quite literally is given credit for fortifying, furnishing, possibly even founding in certain ways. He passed away just a few months after retiring, having at that point contributed to nearly every facet of Italian history in one way or another. And most of the facets of the architecture, like the buildings he founded, still don't exactly make sense today. We look at the original Star Fort city. We see his photorealistic depictions of cities, albeit they had no people. He created massive sculptures. Some of them were painted. He designed altarpieces, large-scale paintings. He wrote the treatise that reshaped architecture for the next 500 years, and he directly influenced Leonardo da Vinci. And I've only begun to scratch the surface of these things that are associated with Giorgio Martini. So it becomes very interesting. Have you ever heard of this man before watching this video? And to wrap up the video, I don't think we would be doing Giorgio Martini justice without actually looking at his treatise on architecture. I tried to include every page regarding the star fortifications. What's absolutely magnificent about this is to imagine that most of these creations came directly from his mind. And then from Italy, they developed in even more locations across the realm. That is the narrative we are given today. And yet from the beginning, what was Martini's inspiration? What influenced him to come up with an idea like this large-scale fortifying of entire regions to be symmetrical, star-shaped cities? To imagine the manpower that would have to go into this. And yet, as we dive into this history, the treaty, we can see that there are machines that were used. There are different mechanisms that may not have been perfected at this time, but they began to be utilized, and they were still being used during the Industrial Revolution. We can see how cutting edge everything contained within this treaty is, and also how off the wall some of these designs are. We have flying machines. We have land vehicles that appear to be powered with early motors, other things like that. So again, I will leave a link to all of this down below. We'll go through the photographs together now, and I can't wait to hear your opinion about this down below. Also, before I chime out, there was a statue created by Giorgio Martini. It was created before a much more famous statue of the same name that would come just a few years later. This is known as Giorgio Martini's David, and his depiction of David is actually much more Semitic looking.